We're now going to hear about 3 situations relating to loss, inappropriate use and availability of information. Each one will be followed with a JISC legal response.
Hi Elaine. David just rang and said he left his bag in his car in Tesco's car park on Friday night and it's been taken. It had his laptop in it. He didn't notice it was gone until this morning. Who needs to know about that sort of thing? Do you think that Tesco's might have found it? He said it had all the stuff he was working on for the e-assessment. It had the login names and emails of all the students. Do you think IT will have a backup of that information?
Loss of personal data of individuals in this way is a significant incident. It is likely that the college is in breach of the Data Protection Act 1998, and this type of loss of personal data is increasingly being highlighted in the press, which can attract negative publicity. All colleges have a responsibility under the Data Protection Act to ensure appropriate and proportionate security of the personal data they hold. Although individuals may have a right to claim compensation from a college if they have suffered damage because the college has breached part of the Act, they can normally only claim for any distress suffered if they have also suffered damage. Compensation is unlikely to be awarded by the court just because an individual is very angry or upset about the loss of personal data, or because they think they may have been damaged by the loss. Claimants must be able to meet the necessary burden of proof, and the Data Protection Act requires individuals to prove what is called the causational link between the damage that was caused by the loss of personal data to the particular incident where the loss occurred. If this link is established, then compensation for the actual damage can be awarded. This damage has to be measurable and quantifiable. Now, there are 4 important elements to any data loss management plan: containment and recovery, assessment of the ongoing risk, notification of the breach or loss of data, and an evaluation and response. Data security breaches will need not just an initial response to investigate and contain the situation, but also a recovery plan, including damage limitation. This will often involve input from specialists such as IT specialists, human resources specialists, and perhaps legal specialists. It is important to consider the following. Decide on who should take the lead on investigating the breach and ensure they have the appropriate resources. Establish who needs to be made aware of the breach and inform them of what they are expected to do to assist in the containment exercise. Establish whether there is anything that can be done to recover any losses and limit the damage the loss of data can cause. As well as the physical recovery of equipment, this could involve the use of backup tapes to restore lost or damaged data, or ensuring that staff recognize when someone tries to use the stolen data to access accounts, for example. Where appropriate, inform the police. Assessing the risks. It's important to carry out an assessment of potential adverse consequences for individuals, how serious or substantial these are, and how likely they are to happen. Relevant factors include what type of data, how sensitive the data is, and who the individuals are whose data has been breached. Whether they are staff, students, customers, clients, or suppliers, for example, will to some extent determine the level of risk posed by the loss of data and therefore the appropriate actions in attempting to mitigate these risks. What harm can come to those individuals? Are there wider consequences to consider, such as the loss of confidence in the service you provide? Notification of breaches. Strictly, there is no legal obligation on data controllers to report data loss. However, serious breaches should be notified to the Information Commissioner's Office via their website. New powers granted to the ICO from April 2010 strengthen the responsibility to report data breaches. Factors to consider in deciding how serious the loss is when deciding to notify the Information Commissioner's Office include the potential harm to data subjects. This is the overriding consideration in deciding whether a breach of data security should be reported to the Information Commissioner's Office. 2. The extent of harm, which can include distress, is dependent on both the volume of personal data involved and the sensitivity of the data. Where there is little risk that individuals would suffer significant harm, for example because the stolen laptop is properly encrypted, or the information that is the subject of the breach is publicly available information, there is no need to report. The volume of personal data lost. There should be a presumption to report to the Information Commissioner's Office where a large volume of personal data is concerned and there is a real risk of individuals suffering some harm. Every case must be considered on its own merits, but a reasonable rule of thumb is any collection containing information about 1,000 or more individuals. The sensitivity of the data lost. There should be a presumption to report to the ICO where smaller amounts of personal data are involved, the release of which could cause a significant risk of individuals suffering substantial harm. This is most likely to be the case where that data is sensitive personal data as defined in Section 2 of the Data Protection Act. As few as 10 records could be the trigger if the information is particularly sensitive. Evaluation and response. It is important not only to investigate the causes of the breach, but also to evaluate the effectiveness of your response to it. Clearly, if the breach was caused even in part by systemic and ongoing problems, then simply continuing the breach and continuing business as usual is not acceptable. Similarly, if your response was hampered by inadequate policies or a lack of a clear allocation of responsibility, then it is important to review and update these policies and lines of responsibility in the light of experience. The Information Commissioner has produced guidance specific to loss of personal data called Guidance on Data Security Breach Management and is available from the ICO website www.ico.gov.uk.
Hi Stephen. I have a student in my group that has complained about another student that is bullying her. She is one of those students that just doesn't seem to get along with the others and is a bit touchy.